You are not alone. Everyone is fighting a silent battle. Richard Brewster never thought he'd feel lonely after retirement. He had been an aerospace engineer, traveled across the country, led complex technical teams, and spoken in front of large crowds. At 67, he figured he'd finally earned his rest. What no one told him was that the silence of old age could be deafening. Every morning, Richard brewed a cup of coffee and sat in the worn armchair by the living room window, gazing out at the backyard where squirrels chased each other like nothing had changed. But something had. Linda, his wife, had passed away 2 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. Since then, the house felt empty in a way he couldn't quite put into words. The laughter, the soft arguments, even her gentle nagging about the blanket he always left on the couch was all gone. They say time heals. But for Richard, time only dulled the sharp edges. It didn't erase the ache. He still went to the grocery store every week, but no longer bought 2 slices of pie. He still attended church every Sunday, but the pew beside him was always empty. One April afternoon, while walking through the nearby park, Richard saw an older man sitting alone on a bench. The man was holding a book, but he wasn't turning the pages. There was something familiar in his gaze, quiet sadness, proud and buried deep. Richard hesitated for a moment, then sat down at the other end of the bench. "Nice weather today," he said. The man looked up and offered a faint smile. "Yeah, been a while since we've had sun like this." And just like that, a conversation began. The man's name was Gerald. He was 72, a former Marine. His wife had died 3 years earlier. His children lived in other states. He too felt the silence of a house that used to be full. But there was one thing Gerald did each week he volunteered at the local senior center. "I don't go there to help others," Gerald said. "I go to help myself." That sentence stayed with Richard the whole evening. He realized he'd built a wall around himself, letting grief shut out the world. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to step outside. The following week, Richard visited the community center. There were classes in pottery, dance, book clubs, and even life storytelling. He signed up for a ceramics class, and for the first time in months, he laughed when he accidentally broke a clay vase he was trying to mold. The people around him laughed too, not to mock, but because they understood. Everyone had been a beginner once. As the weeks passed, Richard became a regular. He shared stories from his engineering days, helped other seniors figure out their smartphones, and listened to people open up about their own losses. One afternoon, during a group session, he heard Eleanor, a retired literature teacher, talk about how she couldn't read a single page of her favorite novels after her husband died, her eyes always filled with tears. "But then I realized," she said, "grief doesn't belong in a box. It needs to be spoken, to be heard. And when I shared it, the weight lifted just a little." Richard looked around the room that day, dozens of silver-haired people, each carrying a story no one else could see. One had lost a child. Another had just been diagnosed with cancer. Another was slowly losing their memory. But they were still there, still laughing, still showing up for each other. One day, Richard took the mic at a weekly gathering. He spoke about Linda, their love, the loss, and the hollow quiet that followed. "I thought I'd be alone forever," he said. "But then I met all of you, and I realized loneliness doesn't have to be endured alone." There was a long silence in the room. Then came the applause, nods of understanding, moist eyes. That moment birthed something new. Afterward, Richard started a small support group called You Are Not Alone. Each week, people gathered not to be strong, not to pretend they were fine, but just to be real. They shared small victories. One woman went outside for the first time in 3 months. A man called his daughter after 5 years of silence. Another read aloud from a poem he'd written in secret. Richard came to understand something powerful. No one escapes pain, loss, or change. But no one has to face it alone either. If you're reading this and something in your heart stirred, know this: you are not alone. Whatever you're going through, sadness, grief, confusion, or just a nagging sense that no one truly sees you, please remember this. Millions of people are quietly fighting their own battles. Each one different, but all of them real. You don't have to do something grand. Start small. Say hello to the person sitting alone at the park. Call an old friend. Join a local class. Smile at a stranger. That's how silent battles begin to lose their power. That's how a lonely world begins to warm again. And that's how you, wherever you are, whoever you are, will come to know. You are not